Friends, it is my greatest pleasure to welcome you back to another video of this kind. I thank you so much for the positive reaction on my first trying to solve an Agatha Christie murder mystery video, because to be honest, it means so much to me because, like, in general, people in the booktube community, people who either make content about books or take time out of their pleasure time, out of their free time to watch content about books, you're all just good people. But even within the booktube community, it takes a special kind of je ne sais quoi to watch a 40-minute Agatha Christie video. And I know that, and I see that, and I respect that, and I thank you basically for having watched that video, for having been so nice in the comments down below. So yeah, it is so cool that I get to make another one of these videos, because I really enjoyed making one of these and you seem to have been enjoying them as well. So let's give it another try, shall we? So the murder I will be trying to solve this time is Agatha Christie's Cards on the Table. Now, if you have watched my other video, you know that this was one of the books that I had selected before I then chose to do it on the, what was it called, Death in the Clouds. But so, like, for the second time, I picked up this one. But friends, I fear I have made a grievous mistake, because I have already started reading this and, like, I'm almost already finished, but I only started this last night. But I am committed, because actually I didn't get to solve the matter last time. I got to solve like parts of it and I was happy with that, but honestly, of course, I would love to solve the matter actually, but with this one I don't even think I have a fair chance of doing so, because I will set the scene, introduce you to everyone in a second. But basically what I think plays a major role in this book is bridge, the game of bridge. And now you must know that my knowledge of the game of bridge is, for the lack of a better word, non-existent. I know that the game exists and that's it. I couldn't have even sworn to the fact that it's played with cards. Like, if you would have told me, no, it's played with marbles or stuff like that, I would have believed you. So I fear like a major hint is gonna be hidden within this game, and I'm not going to be able to get that, because whenever they talk about the game and like about the moves they made, I understand squat. Okay, so I think I definitely made a poor choice picking this one to try to solve the matter again, but I will be giving it a try anyway. But again, like, I think there's definitely going to be a clue in the game and I'm not going to be able to get that in any way, shape or form. So that only means, of course, that I have to be even more thorough in understanding all the other clues, because that's the only way I have somewhat of a chance to solving this. So without further ado, let's get started. So you guys, you might remember that last time I used my ridiculously big pinboard to map out all the characters, etc., and show it to you all the time. But to be honest, that pinboard, she's just larger than life. I couldn't handle her. It was always like, how do I and where do I to fit it into the screen and stuff. So this time around, I decided to give you a little PowerPoint presentation, because it made it way easier to, I don't know, set everything up. So I hope you can see this and there's no flare on the screen. So let's solve another murder, friends, shall we? Now, the setup of this book is Hercule Poirot meets a Mr. Shaitana at like a snuff box conference, and they start talking about murder. Now, Mr. Shaitana, he's a bit of a dubious character, if you will. He's a bit of a, it's hard to pinpoint, but he's a bit of a crook. He's a bit of a weirdo. He has a weird sense of humor and interest. And basically, he claims to Poirot that he has some people in his acquaintance that he for a fact knows are murderers who got away with it. And he then invites Poirot to a dinner party with a few of these murderers that he knows to basically just, I don't know, tease Poirot. Mr. Shaitana, can you see this? I really hope you can, because obviously I put in a lot of effort. Anyway, so Mr. Shaitana, he's not only the host, but he's also the victim, because of course somebody has to die. And after the dinner, they all sit down for a game of bridge, as I just mentioned, and they are divided into two rooms, two tables. One of the tables, as you will see in a second, we have our four sleuths playing a game of bridge, and in the other room we have our four murderers playing a game. And Shaitana is in the same room as the four murderers. Poor choice if you ask me. He's not playing himself, but he's sitting by the fireplace, and well, he ends up being stabbed with an object that has not yet been like closer described, except that that is like a long and thin needle sort of thing that has like at the end a sort of stud. Now this object that he has been stabbed with, we already know that was just like lying around somewhere on a table, aka anyone could have grabbed it and stabbed him with it. But that of course also indicates that this crime was not premeditated, but that the murderer saw this and kind of like took his chances of killing Mr. Shaitana spontaneously. Because Mr. Shaitana, during the dinner, he had been making some allegations, or the things he has been saying that were probably kind of sus, because he was making these insinuations that it would be oh so easy to kill someone and get away with it by either pretending it's like a shooting accident, a domestic accident, how doctors have an easy time killing their patients with like poisons and stuff. Plus, he also talked about how poison is a woman's like means of killing someone. He was saying all this stuff, and probably he was making allegations to like the farm murderers and how they killed someone in the past. And he kind of signed his own death certificate with that one, because the murderer presumably freaked, thought that Mr. Shaitana was gonna, I don't know, reveal him, and so they took their chances and stabbed him with this long thin needle kind of thing. Now, our dinner party, as I just said, is divided into 4 sleuths and 4 murderers. Our 4 sleuths are Hercule Poirot, Abdi, Superintendent Battle, Scotland Yard's best representative, the mystery writer Mrs. Oliver, and Colonel Race, awful name, and he's like a secret service kind of dude, and he's also, well, helping them solve the murder. Our 4 murderers are Dr. Robert, a medical practitioner of quite a cheerful countenance, who claims he himself is interested in crime. We have Mrs. Lorimer, who knows Dr. Robert not well, but kind of. She's 63, she's a well-informed and intelligent lady who loves bridge. Major Despas, he's a handsome man, very important. He has a big scar on his temple because like he's this traveler dude, always over the globe. He has written a travel book, and yeah, that's his character basically. And then last but not least, we have Miss Meredith. She's in her early 20s, precisely 25. She's pretty and shy and claims to be not interested in crime. But how come she's on the murderers list, right? Anyway, as I said, after dinner, they sit down for a game of bridge. Now, folks, this is where it gets complicated again, because I do not understand how this game works in any way, shape or form. But, so we have all our murderers in one room playing a game, and all our sleuths playing a game in another room. And again, Mr. Shaitana is in the same room as the murderers. They start playing at about 9:30. Mr. Shaitana is seated next to the fireplace. No one else entered the room since they started playing, not even like a servant, a butler, whatever. There are drinks in the room, and everyone at one point or another has gotten up to like move around, because if I understand this game, that's like the only thing I kind of think I got about bridge, is that it is always played in a team of 4s, and like the people sitting opposite each other are a team. And basically, I think in every game, at least in this variation that they're playing, which I think is called rubber bridge, there's always one person is the dummy. The dummy's cards are being laid open, and basically, like, let's say he's the dummy, and basically your team partner, and like everybody sees your cards, of course, but your team partner plays with your cards for you, aka the dummy himself or herself. They are not involved in the game per se. Like during the time that you're the dummy, you can do whatever, aka actually I think this is a game for 3 people, not 4, because if always one person is the dummy and they don't have a role while they're a dummy, what they're for, right? But so during the time that they played, each and every one of them, I think, was the dummy at some point and like walked around the room while they did that. Now 3 rubbers were played, and they were in the middle of the 4th rubber. In the first round, it was the men against the ladies, aka Miss Meredith and Miss Lorimer against the major and the doctor. In the second round, it was Miss Meredith and the doctor versus the major and Mrs. Lorimer. And in the third round, it was Mrs. Lorimer and the doctor versus the Miss Meredith and the major. Oh, shit, that's a mouthful. God. Okay, and they were in the middle of the fourth game when the others entered from their room, came in, and, well, saw that Mr. Shaitana had been stabbed. And in the fourth round, it was Miss Meredith and the doctor versus the Major and Mrs. L. And it might be important that Mrs. L, she's like an ace, and she won all the rounds, like every rubber. Honestly, this lingo, I can't. Now, the location, the room that the foul murderers have been playing in which Mr. Shaitana has been stabbed, Poirot inquired of all the people in the room afterwards what they remember was in the room. And, well, because Poirot is requiring after it, it must be somewhat important, but some of them gave an awful long description of what was in the room, and I did not write everything down, but I wrote down the pages so I could go back. But basically, I think maybe it's less about the actual objects, but it basically tells Poirot what kind of person these players are, because Dr. Roberts, he was basically able to name almost everything in the room. Like, there were some settees, chairs, Persian rugs, a bureau, the Chinese cabinet, grand piano, Japanese prints, snuff boxes, jewelry, and all that sort. In other words, he was a very keen observer, and he saw all of those things and could remember them even like a few days afterwards. Mrs. Lorimer, on the other hand, she only noticed like some glass flowers, some Chinese, Japanese pictures, tulips. She was basically focused on the game the entire time and therefore kind of blind to the surroundings. But I think it is a vital clue that she noticed the tulips, like these fresh flowers. And I will come back to that in a second because I already have a theory. Okay, Major Despat, he noticed some rugs and like knickknacks laying around, etc. Poirot said that he has a pretty limited vision, as in he only sees things he's personally interested in, and he wasn't interested in a whole lot in that room, so he didn't notice a whole lot. Now, let's meet our 4 suspects, right? Dr. Roberts. He got up 3 times during the night, each time while being the dummy. For the first time, he says around 10:30 to put some wood on the fire. For the second time, he went to get the ladies some drinks shortly afterwards. And for the third time at around 11:30, when he got up to get himself a drink. Each of these 3 times, he thought that Mr. Shaitana was simply asleep. So he claims. He remembers that the Major got up twice to get an ashtray and to get himself a drink. He remembers that Mrs. Lorimer got up once to poke the fire, and he remembers vaguely that she spoke to Mr. Shaitana, though he didn't hear Mr. Shaitana answer, so he only remembered her talking to him but didn't hear an answer. Miss Meredith, she got up as well while she was being dummy and playing with Dr. Roberts to look at his hand and then also to look at the other hands, and then to like, she wandered around the room. Okay, friends, I had to change position because my arm was falling off. Now, moving on to Mrs. Lorimer. Now, she knows Mr. Shaitana from a long time ago, but she does not know him well. She met him in Egypt, to be precise, in Luxor. She got up once herself while being the dummy to go to the fire and talk to Shaitana, but she realizes that the others would not have heard him answer, so she knows that they only have her word for saying that Mr. Shaitana was still alive at that time. She says, though, that was around 10:30. Now, she remembers that Dr. Roberts got up to get her a drink, and the Major got up at around 11:15 to get himself a drink as well, but he also got up at another time, but she couldn't fully remember when. Now, Mrs. Meredith, she remembers, got up once to look at her partner's hand. Now, Miss Meredith, she's staying at the Ladies Neville Military Club because she lives outside of London. She met Mr. Shaitana 9 months ago in Switzerland during the winter sports season, and she was pretty afraid of him and like uncomfortable in his presence, which made me think that maybe he took advances on her that she was not comfortable with, and that might have been the reason why she didn't like him. She got up to look at the others' hands and walked about, but doesn't remember if and when the others got up, etc. Poirot deducts that she must come from like a poorish background because she double used like a piece of paper, like she turned it around to use the back as well, and like a rich person wouldn't do that. Now, Major Despat, he met Shaitana only twice, for the first time only a month ago. His motive would basically be that he's quite open about having disliked Shaitana a lot, because he in general, he dislikes insincere company, and he thought the Shaitana to be a very insincere man. He got up twice to get an ashtray and to poke the fire at around 10:30 and to get a drink at 11, he says. He remembers Mrs. Lorimer went to the fire and he heard her speak to Mr. Shaitana, but he didn't hear if Mr. Shaitana replied or not. Miss Meredith, wandered around the room. The doctor got up at least, it says 3 or 4 times. This is where it gets really complicated again, because I don't understand how bridge works. But basically, Poirot has been asking about the bridge scores. And we also have like this illustration in the book. And always when you have an illustration, it's important in one way, shape or form. But if the clue is like in these numbers somewhere, because they don't add up, or like they claim to have played a certain move, but that wouldn't have been possible. And that's how Poirot knows that they were lying and blah, blah, blah. I will not be able to get that clue because I do not get the game. But Poirot has also been making some deductions by the way they played, like making deductions about their character, what kind of person they are, basically. These are the psychological profiles of our suspects. Now, of course, the doctor, he has the medical knowledge that it would require maybe to kill Mr. Shaitana with this long, thin needle. Plus, he's a bit of a bluffer and overcaller and quite confident in himself, aka he would probably have the guts to commit this murder quite spontaneously, but wouldn't he be more likely to kill someone with like medical means instead of stabbing someone? Then Mrs. Lorimer, she seems to have a lot of nerve. She might have secrets, but she seems to be quite high-principled and rather cool and mathematical and calculating, aka she would be more likely to like premeditate a crime a long time before committing it, and she would be less likely to kill someone out of the spur of the moment, kind of. But who knows? The Major, he has lots of nerves. He's familiar with making quick decisions, and he's familiar also with like dangerous things and situations. He's cool and resourceful. Like he would be quite capable of killing someone spontaneously like that. Miss Meredith, she seems shy and nice, but, sorry, the apostrophe here is wrong. But basically, they don't know anything about her. So it's kind of like hard to judge her character. She seems to be timid and careful and economical, but she is the most likely out of the 4 of them to commit a crime out of fear of exposure, you know? Now, these are basically all the things we know about the suspect and about the crime right after they have been like interrogated at the crime scene still. But now, of course, the inspector, like our 4 sleuths, they dig into the suspect's past to find out what are the crimes that Mr. Shaitana at least claimed or thought he knew about them, and who had reason to basically want to kill him. Dr. Roberts, he seems to have a pretty straightforward career. He was born in Ludlow, Shropshire. His father died when he was 15. He was an only child. Both of his parents are dead at this point. He has no wife or children. He has never gotten any legacy from patients. But there were 2 instances, like one, there was a Mrs. Graves, a patient who thought she was being poisoned by him, but then she also thought she was being poisoned by other doctors, and like she went from doctor to doctor to doctor and always thought she was being poisoned by them, so probably nothing there. But there was a Mrs. Craddock, and that's where it gets interesting. She was supposed to be man-mad and basically told lies about having an affair with Dr. Roberts, but what if they really had one? And the parlourmaid of now the late Mrs. Craddock, because she's dead, said that there was like a big confrontation with Mr. Craddock, so her husband, and he threatened Dr. Roberts to like expose him and have like his medical license revoked. And shortly afterwards, the dear Mr. Craddock died out of an infection. And Dr. Roberts was at the house at the time, and he was at the bathroom, and he could have easily infected the shaving brush that Mr. Craddock later died out of an infection. He could have infected the brush while he was using the bathroom in their house. And Mrs. Craddock, she also died short time afterwards when she went to Egypt after her husband had died. But before she went to Egypt, she got a typhoid vaccination, I suppose, by the doctor, and he could have infected her with some blood disease that she later died of in Egypt. So very suspicious, and probably quite true that he killed at least the husband and probably also the wife because he wanted to shut both of them up because they could have ruined him. Poirot also asked all of the suspects if they could actually remember all of the moves of the game. Dr. Roberts could remember like a few of them, and he remembered that Miss Meredith made a few mistakes towards the end and that her hands were kind of shaky. Now, Mrs. Lorimer, Poirot has also asked her about if she remembers like all of those moves in the game, and she remembered every single one of them, aka she has an amazing memory and concentrated on the game really intently. But that's also the reason why she did not really remember much of the surroundings in the room. But doesn't that also like prove that because she remembers every single move, I mean, of course she's a first class player, but still, because she remembered every single move, she cannot have been away from the table. Like, we know that she was at the fire, like, at some point, but it could have been for too long, because otherwise, how could she remember all the moves, etc.? So I think that because she remembers everything of the game, she was probably not the killer, because they would have taken away from her concentration and all of that. Miss Meredith, she lives in the countryside with a friend of her, a Miss Rhoda Dawes. They are very much opposite in character. Plus, Mrs. Dawes, she has all the money. They have been living there together for a bit over 2 years, and Miss Meredith is there kind of like in the position of like her friend, her companion. They were at school together back in the day, but we know that Miss Meredith, she's a bit jealous and annoyed with Miss Rhoda Dawes, but because she has all the money, of course, she can't really do anything about it. We know about Miss Meredith that she was born in India, that her father was in the army. His name was Major John Meredith. Her mother died when she was 11, and her father died when she was 18. And afterwards, she had to work to live because she did not have an inheritance or anything. First, she worked at a house in Cheltenham for 2 years, and Poirot made a point of mentioning that the lady she worked for there was very untidy. Later, which she concealed from the inspector, but then later her friend Rhoda Dawes, she went to Mrs. Oliver, so one of the sleuths, and told her about it. For a few months, she worked somewhere where the lady of the house took poison by mistake and died, and she did not tell the inspector about that, which of course is very suspicious. Plus, Miss Meredith, she saw her friend going to Mrs. Oliver, and of course suspects that she told her about that incident. After that incident, she worked for Rhoda's aunt. She worked there for 3 years, again like in the house, but also in the position of a gardener. It's going to be important, remember that in a second. Plus, she herself, she says she wants to stay out of the investigation because she's really uncomfortable with the entire subject. The major visited her and her friend in their cottage outside because he wanted to like give her some advice, and offered his own solicitor as a solicitor for her as well. In other words, like he wants to help her, he's being very protective of her. She met Shaitana in Switzerland. She went there with Rhoda and like a larger party of other friends. But yeah, Mr. Shaitana, he kind of took a fancy to her. He apparently did not make any like unseemly advances, but he kept sticking around and made her uncomfortable, aka, did he know something about her? Did he know about this thing that's happened where the lady took the poison by mistake and kind of like blackmailed her about her, or simply insinuated that he knew about it, etc.? We don't know. And last but not least, what we know further about the major is like he visited Mrs. Meredith to like warn her that the inspector is coming to investigate her, and recommended her a lawyer, etc. Is he only in love with her, or is there more to that? We don't know yet. He knew from a reliable source that Shaitana, he was a bit of a spiritual blackmailer. So he didn't actually blackmail people for money, but he kind of just did it for the pure fun of it, to see like people wither and squirm in front of him because they know that he knows, etc. And he apparently did it especially with women. So again, that makes sense. Did he know about this instance with Miss Meredith and kind of blackmailed her in that aspect? He does not remember a whole lot of the actual moves of the game, but remembers that the doctor was quite daring and made them lose when they were partners. He himself has an unblemished record, but there was an instance in South America when he accompanied a botanist professor who died of poison, but someone back then, like a local, said that he was actually shot. So did Major Despard shoot that man? Did he have something with that wife? The widow is still alive and in London, and Poirot is off to investigate her any second now. So we will know more in a few pages, but there has been insinuated that also maybe Shaitana blackmailed not him, but maybe the woman of that professor that the Major maybe shot. So you see, there are a lot of connections. But now my theory right now. My theory right now is that it was Miss Meredith, because there are a few things that don't add up, or like because of a few things that has been said. First of all, it was said that she worked for this family that was very untidy, aka she would have experience in seeing small things in a lot of clutter, because like this pin needle that Shaitana was stabbed with, it was laying around the room, but there was like a lot of other knickknacks and stuff around the room, and some people mightn't have even noticed it, but she, having like a trained eye because she worked for this untidy family, she would have seen it and recognized its potential basically. So that's important. Plus those flowers that have been mentioned, maybe the flowers were like another insinuation of Mr. Shaitana towards one of the murderers towards her, because we know that she used to work not only in the houses of these families but also as a gardener. She knows about flowers, and maybe tulips had something to do with either this one instance where the lady of the house took poison by mistake, or maybe it also has something to do with, maybe there was something else with when she worked for Rhoda's, like her friend's aunt, and these tulips are kind of like a symbol of that, and by putting the tulips out, even though it's winter, so they were not in season right now, so Mr. Shaitana made a point of putting tulips in the room. So I think that it's like a hint. So maybe these tulips, they represent the crime that she committed back then or something like that. So maybe she saw the tulips and recognized them as like a sign by Mr. Shaitana. Then she saw this pin needle and was like, okay, I gotta kill this dude right now. Because in general, I don't buy her whole, I'm shy and not interested in crime and I want to stay out of all of this act. I don't buy it, I gotta say. And my theory will be fortified if something happens to her friend, because she saw that her friend went to this Mrs. Oliver and she suspects that she told her about like this instance where the lady died in the house that she worked. And I think maybe if now something happens to the friend, it's definitely her, because like she feared that her friend would kind of like bust her or say something that she doesn't want her to say. Plus she's a bit annoyed with that friend in general, but she can't really like leave her because she's living off of that friend. Like the house that they're living in the countryside, her friend bought it and she's only living there, so she's kind of dependent on her friend. But now she fears that maybe she revealed the secret about her. So I have this feeling that this friend is gonna be killed and it's gonna be Miss Meredith. I think it is Miss Meredith right now. Okay, that's everything so far. I'm already like 2/3 through for sure. I'm gonna continue reading and I'm gonna give you an update about all the clues, and then before reading the final chapter, I will give you my final theory. But let's see if I still have to change my opinion, or if I will stick to Miss Meredith. Because also like the doctor, he remembered that her hands shook towards like the end of the game, right? So maybe because like he had just stabbed Shaitana. Okay, Poirot has just confirmed what we already thought was true. Major Despard, he actually did shoot that professor, because he and the wife of the professor, they were in love. They didn't actually have something, but he ended up having to shoot the professor out of self-defense because they got into a fight or something. And apparently Shaitana knew about it and blackmailed, like spiritually blackmailed her with it. So that's how Major Despard, he knew what Shaitana was doing. That's why he disliked him so much. And all of that. Now, the Major came to Poirot though and claimed that what the lady said wasn't true at all, though, that yes, he did shoot the husband, but not because of like a lover's quarrel, but because basically of an actual accident that she kind of caused, and that she's only imagining all that stuff, that he was in love with her, that he actually kind of despised her and stuff. But like either way, he shot him, and he knew that Shaitana knew about that, and Shaitana could have, of course, twisted that thing into something quite scandalous and stuff. So he still has a good motive, but y'all, I don't even care about that. My target is locked on Meredith. Anyway, let's continue. Oh yeah, and Poirot just went into like a women's stocking store and bought 19 pairs of women's stockings. I don't know why. I do not. I wonder how they come into play, honestly. What is going on? Now, about Miss Meredith, this woman, Mrs. Benson, that died by mistake because she drank poison, basically. The superintendent, he's convinced that she actually did it, and I am too. There seems to be no clear motive because she didn't like benefit from the death. Like apparently this employee, she was quite harsh, but she could have just left the position. She didn't inherit any money or anything. Not quite sure about motive, but yeah, I'm pretty sure she killed her. Okay, so now Hercule also interviewed Miss Meredith one more time. He also asked her what she remembered was in the room at the time, and she says she knows like some rocks, a piano, some Egyptian jewelry, and a vase of chrysanthemums, which is a kind of flower that I'm sure I mispronounced, but she did not mention the tulips. And I think that's gonna be a hint like, oh, you were a gardener and yet you didn't notice that like in winter there were tulips, which is like highly irregular, and you didn't mention them. I'm sure that's a hint. Plus now it also came out why Hercule bought all these stockings. He had Miss Meredith, like he said he needs some stockings for like his nieces and grandnieces, and she should pick out the 6 nicest pairs, etc. And then he went out of the room with her friend to show her something else, and 3 minutes later they came back and she showed him like, yeah, these are the best ones. And once they were gone, Hercule counted the stockings, and apparently she had taken 2 pairs with her. Now why might that be? Like we already know that we think that she comes like from like a poorish background because like her parents both died, leaving her nothing, etc. So she might be a kleptomaniac, and like she stole some stockings, but did she just do that because, well, she's poor and she wanted them? Or is there some bigger meaning behind them? He bought 19 pairs, but he now tells her there are, I think, about 15 or 16 pairs over there. Would you be so amiable as to take a look at them, blah, blah, blah. And then she takes some of them. She took advantage of the situation and stole some that she thought that he didn't even know were there, because he said they are 15 or 16, but there were 19, and she took 2. Here's a thought. Maybe Poirot wanted to establish that she steals stuff when she has the opportunity, because maybe this Mrs. Benson that she used to work at, maybe she caught her stealing and she threatened to expose her, and that's why she killed her, because she didn't want to go to, I don't know, jail. Do you go to jail for like stealing a bunch of knickknacks in a household that you work at? But I mean, it would have given her like a bad reputation. She might have not been able to get another job. So maybe that was the point of that. I'm locked on Miss Meredith. If this turns out to be someone else, no, it must be her, right? It must be. Friends, there was an unexpected turn. At the end of the chapter, Mrs. Lorimer just said that she killed Mr. Shaitana. But the book isn't over yet, so maybe it's gonna be a false confession, you know? Plus, because Poirot also mentioned that, ooh, you've been having tea with Miss Meredith, because they have. And when they had tea, Mrs. Lorimer said something to the extent of, yeah, I'm old, I already like have lived my life, but you're still young, you still have your life in front of you. So maybe she's now confessing to the murder because she thinks Miss Meredith did it, and she wants to like save her, like let her live a life because she feels sorry for her or something. I don't know, but it doesn't matter right now at all, because I'm going to have lunch now, and then I'm gonna finish this one. I think this is gonna be a false confession. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's gotta be a false confession. Come on. Okay, guys, I am in a bit of a food coma now, but I am determined to finish this now while I still have light, because it will get dark in like 50 minutes, right? So Mrs. Lorimer has confessed to the matter because right now, like, she's fatally ill and she has not longer to live, so she killed him. But Poirot is skeptical. Now Poirot is confronting her that, after all, as I said, she is only pretending to confess because she wants to protect Meredith. In other words, she's convinced that Meredith did it, like, as I am. But now, if everybody's convinced that she did it, and there's always like a big twist and turn at the end, it can't be her. Oh wait, but now she says she's so convinced that it was Meredith because she saw her. So was it her after all? Is there gonna be a big twist in the end or not? Am I right or am I wrong? And is this darn game of bridge and those scores and everything gonna come into play or not? I think there are only like 3 chapters left. Before the last one, I shall give you my final opinion. But right now, I'm not sure if there's gonna be a big twist at the ending or not. apparently the thing that Mrs. Lorimer saw was that she saw Miss Meredith like touch Mr. Shaitana's chest and then like look up and look like all guilty and afraid, but so she didn't like see her stick the thing in. So maybe, I mean, like right now I'm still convinced that it was her, so maybe like she did catch her in the act in that sense, but since she didn't saw her like insert that thingy, maybe that was only the moment that Miss Meredith like realized that he was dead, but she didn't say anything because she was afraid, because she thought that like, okay, one of the other three is the murderer and she didn't want to say anything. That could still be like a twist, that that was the moment that Miss Meredith found out and didn't say anything, or that was the moment that she did it herself. And like Poirot has just left and saw someone walking up to Mrs. Lorimer's house that looked very much like Miss Meredith. Plus the next chapter is called, if I'm not mistaken, Suicide. So someone's gonna be killed and it's gonna look like suicide. Maybe Mrs. Lorimer is now gonna turn up dead and it's gonna look like suicide, like she confessed to the murder and then she killed herself, but it will be murder. And it's again Miss Meredith. Okay, Mrs. Lorimer has been found dead and it looks like suicide, and she even left letters for like Dr. Roberts, the Major, and Miss Meredith, like apologizing, like telling them that it was her that killed Mr. Shaitana, that she apologized for like all the inconvenience, but no way that was suicide. Nah, obviously not. And by the way, it was Dr. Roberts who found her, because he opened his letter at 8 o'clock and then rushed over to her house and like found her dead and stuff. The spa is out of town. He hasn't had his morning's post yet. And Miss Meredith says that she has just opened the letter a few moments before the sergeant or like the inspector called her. I'm giving you all of that in detail because maybe that's gonna be where she or like one of them slips up, because they say they knew it before they said they had opened the letter in which they found out or something like that. We gotta be careful. It appears so that the doctor was alone with Mrs. Lorimer in the room. Like he came there and said, oh, it's too late, she's dead, and sent the parlourmaid out to get something though. So he was alone with her. He could have injected her with something, but why? I just say he was alone with her, it's a possibility, you know? Ooh, okay, so it was Miss Meredith that visited her the other night. She stayed for an hour, and after she left, Mrs. Lorimer went to bed, had dinner in her bed, and then went to sleep. That the parlourmaid is convinced that she did not only later in that night write some letters, but there were suddenly 3 letters lying on like a table to be posted. But like Miss Meredith could have just dropped them off as she was leaving, while Mrs. Lorimer was going upstairs to like lay in bed and have her dinner. But the parlourmaid says there were no more than 3 letters, but one of them was for Fortnum and Masons. So if that is true, and only 2 letters were sent to like one of the 2 other suspects, one of them is like lying, saying they got a letter when they didn't, but they still knew she was dead because they killed them. So maybe like Meredith didn't post a letter to herself, but she knew she was dead and she pretended she had opened her letter when the inspector called. Okay, 2 things. So there's a bruise on Mrs. Lorimer's arm, aka has the doctor injected something when he sent the parlourmaid out? So maybe she wasn't dead actually when he came in, blah, blah, blah. So why is there a bruise? Did someone inject her or something? AKA it was definitely not suicide. And Dr. Roberts was like, no, of course I did not know Mrs. Lorimer's handwriting. So someone else could have written that like suicide statement, and plus I killed Mr. Shaitana, because they didn't know the handwriting. Anyone could have written that. So did Meredith put down those letters when she visited her last night? And did she put something in like her food, or like give her something in tea, food, whatever, and then Mrs. Lorimer died overnight? Or was it the doctor who injected something into her arm when he came over? Are they like working together? Because like the doctor couldn't have left the post there the other night because he didn't visit. I'm slowly turning crazy. Okay, this is now the second to last chapter, and I'm convinced that Meredith will be trying to kill her friend Rhoda, because like they're having a conversation right now, and like her friend wants her to confess to the inspector that she did work at that Mrs. Benson's for some time, the one that died, and she's like, no, I don't want to do it, it has nothing to do with this, the murder of Mr. Shaitana, and plus anyway, you're the only one that knows about it. And she has said that, like, you're the only one that knows about it, that she worked at that other lady's and that she died. She has said that twice now. She's for sure gonna try to kill her friend now. I'm convinced. Meredith suggested her friend to go on a walk with her to the river. She will be trying to drown her. At 11, the major will apparently be calling on them, but by then the friend is probably dead, and she will be trying to kill the major too, maybe. And at 12, the inspector is coming to put that murdering bitch in jail, I hope. It's her, for sure. Like, how could there be a turn where it's not her? It's her. Yeah. She killed Shaitana. She also killed Mrs. Lorimer somehow, put those letters in her apartment. Now she will be trying to kill her friend. She might even try to kill the major. They're like, I don't know if she will succeed with him, because like he's this big dude, unless she like poisons him or something. Major Dispa, Poirot and the inspector pretty much arrived all in time to see what looked like Anne pushing her friend into the water, but then also falling into the water themselves, and neither of them can apparently swim. And the major got into the water and saved Rhoda, so the friend first, and then he went back in to save Meredith, but by the time they got her out, yeah, like at battle, like the inspector says, I'm afraid she's gone. So, and like this is the last chapter now, isn't it? No, there are 2 more chapters. But yeah, I don't think there's gonna be like another big revelation. I think this is like a straightforward one. Like usually Agatha Christie does these things that like in the last chapter there are like so many new things popping up and only then things making sense. But this time it looks like for a while now, yeah, it was Meredith all along. She killed all these people and now she wanted to kill her friend as well. Sorry, my hair. I mean, that's my guess. Yeah, it has been all along, and I don't think there's anything else is gonna come up. Oh, fucking hell. Oh, no. Okay, I just read the sentence. I have to cover the rest with my hand, otherwise my eyes are gonna jump down. So, Poirot says, the murderer of Mr. Shaitana was not Mrs. Lorimer, nor was it Major Despa, and curiously enough, it was not Anne Meredith. You see, Dr. Roberts, you were the person who killed Mr. Shaitana, and you also killed Mrs. Lorimer. Okay. The thing with Mrs. Lorimer, I get. There was this punctuation wound in her arm, and he sent the maid out, so he had time to do that. But Shaitana, did they work together or something? Because I mean, still, Meredith, she tried to kill her friend right now and all of that. Oh no! Oh, wrong again. It was early in the morning. You bluffed your way into Mrs. Lorimer's room, where she was still heavily asleep under the influence of the drug she had taken the night before. You bluff again and pretend to see at a glance that she is dead. You pack the parlourmaid off for brandy, hot water, all the rest of it. You are left alone in the room, and then what happens? He shoved her sleeve up and jabbed something into her arm about here. Poirot says, I noticed a bruised place on her arm where something had obviously been injected into a vein. Okay, now, cards on the table, the last chapter, though. I mean, now we already know how everything happened, I guess. And there was one tangible clue, the bridge scores. You may remember that from the beginning I showed a particular interest in those scores. They gave me one valuable hint. I noticed at once in the third rubber the figure of 1,500 above the line. That figure could only represent one thing, a call of Grand Slam. It stands to reason that during an interesting or an exciting hand, the attention of the 3 players will be wholly on the game. Now, a bit of Grand Slam is always exciting. It is very often, as in this case, it was doubled. Every one of the 3 players is playing with close attention. It was then a distinct possibility that the murder was committed during this particular hand, and I determined to find out, if I could, exactly how the bidding had been done. I soon discovered that dummy during this particular hand had been Dr. Roberts. Mrs. Lorimer gave me a valuable piece of information. The Grand Slam was bid by Dr. Roberts, quite unjustably, and he bid it in her suit, not his own, so that she necessarily played the hand. Mrs. Lorimer assured me that she had actually seen Anne Meredith commit the crime. It was not till the following morning, when I stood by a dead woman's bed, that I saw how it could still be right and Mrs. Lorimer still have spoken the truth. Anne Meredith went over the fireplace and saw that Mr. Shaitana was dead. She stooped over him, perhaps stretched out the hat to the gleaming head of jeweled pin. Trembling with fear and apprehension, she goes back to her seat. So Mrs. Lorimer is right. Since she, as she thought, saw the crime committed, but I am right too, for she actually did not see it. That's what I said. At least, again, a tiny bit of the truth was discovered. Okay, so another Agatha Christie murder not solved by yours truly. Okay, I wonder, if you have read this book and if you play bridge, did you see that thing coming, that one move kept all three people really occupied and therefore gave the doctor the best chance to commit the crime? Did you see that coming, or did even like bridge players out there not see that one coming? Because yeah, I did not realize that one. I was convinced it was dear little Miss Meredith. Friends, what should we do? Okay, I shall not despair. You know what they say, third time's the charm. So I will try again next time, and the next time, and the next time. I mean, it is kind of part of an Agatha Christie novel that you do not see it coming. And it was suspicious that all the time, pretty much from like the half point on, everybody talked about how it was Meredith. But I still thought that maybe it was going to turn out to be Meredith. So you can let me know down below in the comments how you think I did, whether you saw that thing coming or not. I failed once more, but I will not let my spirits be dampened, and I will try again next time. Until then, all the best. Bye.